Hello and welcome to the Action Network Podcast UFC Betting Preview. I'm your host, Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward. We're going to discuss this weekend's UFC card going down on Saturday night in Las Vegas. Give you our best bets, favorite underdogs, top props, and more. 13-fight card at the Apex. Start time 4 p.m. Eastern. Main card 7 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that we discussed today, make sure to find the quick slip link in the video description for this podcast, or go to actionnetwork.com/bet now to find some of those quick slips. The main event, Jared Cannonier plus 190, Gregory Robocop Rodriguez minus 225. The over 2.5 rounds in this fight set at about a pick and price minus 105 to the over, minus 115 to the under. That goes the distance at about plus 250. That's how I'm betting this fight. That goes the decision in Cannonier's past two fights, both main events, were about minus 110 pick and prices. Now getting plus 250. Divisional average line around plus 200, or I should say the divisional average finishing odds, the implied odds, are closer to plus 200. About 62% overall. I made this 66%, so got to that plus 200 number. I guess the divisional average odds closer to plus 175 for the fight to go decision implied. So getting a little extra bonus juice on top of that here in the Apex. Can partially adjust for the Apex, but also Cannonier, finished two fights back and effectively finished in his last fight at the end by Caio Bahia, basically knocked out as the final bell was ticking. Could have arguably been stopped, but taken some damage, 41 years old. And do want to mention the age gap here because it applies for both the main event and the co-main event. 8-year age gap between these opponents. The younger fighter typically wins about 69% of the time at average odds of about 56%, roughly 13% over expectation. Rounded up on both of those, but the differential is about 13% that they win compared to the average betting odds. Now, Cannonier has faced a much better competition, faced multiple champions, future title challengers, former title challengers. He's a former title challenger himself, where Rodriguez is taking a step up in competition after fighting mostly unranked guys. He's also never fought 5 rounds, Gregory Rodriguez. Jared Cannonier is in his 6th consecutive 5-round fight, the 8th overall of his career. I think the big, determining factor for Cannonier's success in this fight is Rodriguez's durability, because I do expect Rodriguez to be faster. I expect him to be the better grappler. He hits extremely hard. He's absolutely ripped, but he doesn't grapple proactively all that much. And Jared has pretty good takedown defense, or I should say Jared has pretty good get-up game. His takedown defense can be lackluster. When he does get taken down, he does tend to stay safe and eventually use his strength to pop back to his feet. Not as technical with his get-ups as he is just explosive in terms of getting up. But seen him fade down the stretch in his past 2 fights, seen him get hurt, in multiple fights recently, not even just the fights where he was knocked out, but other fights as well. I think that's why we're getting some extra juice on top of this goes to decision prop. But as I said, made the line plus 200, can get plus 250 currently. And then also Rodriguez by decision at 5-1. I made that line closer to plus 380, like that down at about 4-1 or better. Not substantial bets here. This is the kind of main event where if I wasn't writing about it, if I didn't have to write about the main event, if we didn't have to talk about the main event, would probably not necessarily be betting it. But I do lean to the younger favorite, which I think is a bit contrarian. I do think Jared Cannonier is going to end up looking like a value trap this weekend. And I think Rodriguez by decision is the even more contrarian way to play it. I know people are loading up on Rodriguez inside the distance this weekend. Don't really see him getting the submission. I could see them slugging it out in the center of the cage and either man falling, which certainly lends itself to the Cannonier side. But I think Rodriguez will be a little bit safer than he normally is with the tempo in his first career main event. Billy, I think you would agree with me. Not necessarily the most bettable fight. Cannonier probably like the value side of the money line, looking at it based on past performances, but he's also in his 40s, coming off of those finish losses. You're leaning to the over 2.5 rounds here. If you had to play it, I considered that as well. I kind of thought if it got to the over 2.5 rounds point, it had a pretty good shot of going the full 25 minutes. So give me your analysis on this fight. You're lean to the over 2.5 and any other ways you might consider playing it.
Yeah, as far as the value stuff on Cannonier, I think the case is that G-Rod every once in a while just decides he's Mike Tyson and just wants to plant his feet and throw. And everyone's screaming like, no, don't do that. Occasionally it works and it looks really cool and he knocks out Julian Marquez or whoever. But like there's just enough risk of that it's really hard to lay juice on him because you never know that he's going to do the right thing. We both looked stupid with Cody Steele last week, just deciding that he was going to brawl instead of grapple. And there's just some guys that you always worry about that. With all that said, I like the reason I'm going over 2.5 is one, it's around even money. It's minus 105, which, you're not paying too much on it. But as you pointed out, Cannonier finished in the 4th round by Imavov, kind of sort of finished by Caio Bahaio, like in effect, as the bell rang in the 5th round. Even though he's been in so many 5-rounders, he does seem to kind of collapse late in the fight, especially as he's getting older. And this is a guy who cuts a ton of weight, former heavyweight, massive dude. I can kind of see that argument. It's harder to make the argument because G-Rod's coming to his first 5-rounder, but maybe G-Rod's a little bit safer, takes his time. Like, just given the price that we're getting on that, I don't feel the need to get greedy on the goes to a decision. But, like, if I was betting go to a decision or not, I'm 100% with you. I just think going over 2.5 is kind of a safer way. Or even like fight starts round 3 if you want to lay a little bit of juice. I do think if there's any fight IQ in the Hobocop camp that they're telling him, take your time, get him up against the fence, drag him down, like don't expend everything at once and don't brawl with him. And you would think that would mean a later finish, if at all.
His last fight against CLD probably grappled more proactively than he has at any point in the UFC. 8 minutes of top time in that fight. Would imagine that's part of the game plan for this fight. Mix it up. You are the better all-around martial artist. He's an excellent back taker. Doesn't have submission in the UFC. Does tend to get to very lethal positions, and then ultimately his opponents are able to scramble away from him. So I think there's a chance, just based on regressing like the positions that he gets to, that eventually he's going to find that submission, but he's also going against the higher ranked opponents, higher ranked fighters in the division now. So, that sort of neutralizes out over time. And the finishes, the higher up you go in the division, fights tend to go to a decision just a little bit more frequently because guys tend to be a bit more durable. But yeah, that's the one concern I have bettering the Rodriguez side, especially on the money line. Sometimes he does just want to stand in the pocket and fire, bullets a little bit too long. He's very upright in terms of his striking defense. He leaves his chin up there a little bit. He stays in the pocket a little bit too long. And Cannonier is going to be throwing more in combination with Rodriguez is going to be looking for that, one-shot power, more of those crisp right hands to land and potentially put Cannonier away, where I think Cannonier could potentially land more volume and also just catch Rodriguez on the end of a long combination. But yeah, lean over 2.5 rounds. Lean fight to go to a decision there. Lean Rodriguez by decision at 5-1, as opposed to Cannonier by decision at plus 950. But I don't think that is necessarily a bad bet either if you like the underdog. Let's move on to our fight of the night. Another fight, as I mentioned, with that 8-year age gap between the favorite and the underdog. Yusuf Salal minus 485. Calvin Kattar plus 370. This fight is minus 205 to go to a decision, plus 150 to end inside the distance. And if this fight does go to a decision, I think it helps Calvin Kattar's chances immensely because Zalal's inside the distance props are pretty low considering Kattar's career history of surviving, not getting finished, getting to a decision. He got thoroughly out-wrestled by Aljamain Sterling. Yusuf Salal is not nearly the type of wrestler that Aljo is. He's a very dangerous grappler. He's a really good top game once he gets on top of opponents. But his takedown game is more trip reliant. It's more like Muay Thai trips. He doesn't have that traditional American wrestling style that I think is likely to ground Kattar consistently. And if Zalal isn't landing takedowns here, I think Kattar can keep the fight competitive. And I'm interested in Kattar by decision at 7-1. Billy, I would imagine you think Kattar also has a chance of winning by knockout. Curious your thoughts on that Kattar by decision prop, but I think his takedown defense could keep this fight standing. If he's able to keep the fight standing, it should be competitive.
Yeah, my full preview of this one is up now if anyone's interested, but it's a really interesting fight. Yusuf Zalal 2.0, because this is his second stint in the octagon, 3 straight wins by submission. He has a kickboxing background. In his last fight, he landed a big knee and then got the sub, so we can kind of see that. Calvin Kattar, who we think of as this mostly boxing-based fighter, was a state qualifier in wrestling in high school before he got into MMA. So it's kind of a little bit the opposite of what you would think. Kattar's only been taken down by 3 opponents in his 13 UFC fights. Aljamain Sterling really the only one to do, a lot with it. And even then, the fact that he landed 8 takedowns in 3 rounds means Kattar was able to escape from 5 of them. Sterling didn't do a ton with any of those takedowns. He just got him there and they scrambled around and Kattar eventually got back to his feet. Because of that, I think he'll be able to keep this on the feet for extended stretches. Way more volume from the Kattar side than the Zalal side. This is just a classic minutes versus moments fight for me, where I think Kattar wins most of the minutes with his volume and his more accurate striking. Zalal a little bit more explosive on the feet and can steal some minutes, or some moments, I should say, with takedowns. The only time Kattar's ever been finished in his career, he was submitted once in 2008, and then he blew out his knee a couple fights ago. The Sterling fight was his first fight back from an injury, so I kind of, not always, but often like to bet a guy on the second fight back from an injury. We're assuming he got in a full training camp. It wasn't rushed. He was able to recover. The one thing that gives me pause a teeny bit is he also pulled out of a fight between here and Sterling, so I don't know if that was another injury or what happened there. Didn't seem to be anything significant. But yeah, as you break it down, I love the Kattar by decision side. Lest we forget, though, he was knocking everybody out until he fought Max Holloway and some of the top-level guys. I don't know that Zalal can't be one of these top-level guys in the division. I know we haven't seen it yet. So I'm probably going to add a little bit of a Kattar by decision sprinkle on there just because I do like the logic there. I don't see Zalal getting the submission. Kattar's just a good enough grappler. I think if he gets the finish, it will be with strikes, maybe strikes on the ground. But yeah, we've only been submitted once. It was 17 years ago or something at this point. I'm not too worried about that. I think there's a lot of value on Kattar. The only other thing I would say is this would normally be a perfect point spread fight because he just needs to win one round. DraftKings has the point spread at minus 115, both guys. So just too big of a difference off his money line. I'd rather take the big swing.
Yeah, absolutely. With those money lines at plus 3xx, you normally see plus money on that point spread. Don't want to be betting minus money. I think the money line offers more value relative to that number. I think the decision prop offers more value relative to that number. As you mentioned, Kattar, second fight back off of an injury. Jared Cannonier, third fight back off a knee surgery. So both guys in a similar situation, 8 years older than their opponent, the age angle up against them, facing a younger, better, stronger athlete who can probably out-grapple them, but neither has, particularly dominant top time abilities. Both are able to let their opponents scramble up at times, either due to lack of coherent pressure, top pressure from Rodriguez at times, or just a lack of complete wrestling game from Zalal. So I think both underdogs could be live, could be able to keep those main events and co-main events standing, potentially make them closer and more competitive than the odds suggest. But I think of the two, Kattar, the underdog, I'm much more interested in, and Kattar by decision is how I'd go about playing that. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs on this card. We're in alignment on 2 fighters. I'll go ahead and give out the third before we get to the 2 that are consensus underdogs. Vince Morales at plus 132 against Elijah Smith. You taped Elijah Smith for Contender Series, so I'm curious of your thoughts on Smith as a prospect. I'm not particularly high on him, but more so, I just think now is the time to fade him, because if this guy gets better, he's a very good athlete. This guy gets better, I think he's going to be a lot more difficult for UFC fighters to face. But he has 8 pro fights. Vince Morales has 9 fights in the UFC, 24 overall. So Vince Morales has more UFC fights than Elijah Smith has pro fights. And there's a 12-year age gap between these two. Smith is 22, Morales is 34. But this is not, this is not 28 and 40. 22 and 34 is a lot different. Smith hasn't necessarily hit his physical prime yet. Morales probably slowing down, but not, necessarily at the 35-year-old age cliff that we typically see a big drop off with guys. I do think the first round should be the best round here for Smith, so I'm not allocating a ton pre-fight to Vince Morales. I think the better angle is probably live after round 1. But I think he is, better wrestling. I think he has takedown defense to keep this fight standing. And I don't like Smith's striking defense. I don't like his cardio. So I do think Morales works his way back into the fight in the second or third rounds. Probably get a better number live after round 1, but certainly want some pre-fight at about plus 130. The 2 underdogs we're in alignment on. The first is Andre Petroski against Adolfo Vieira. Billy and I never aligned on Petroski or Vieira fights. We're always on the opposite side. except for one time. Here we are aligned once again. I think we'd both agree Vieira live for an early submission. If he doesn't get that, Petroski has a chance to top time him, especially for the final 2 rounds. I think Petroski's the better wrestler. Vieira clearly the better grappler. The striking should be somewhat neutral. Maybe I give a slight edge to Vieira there, which can justify his favoritism. But Petroski, money line, live after round 1, and then by decision, all 3 ways I consider playing that. For now, though, I'd hold off. That Petroski money line opened at plus 175. It's gotten up to plus 230. It's only moved in one direction. I'm just going to wait to time peak price in that market. And then lastly, Chaos Williams plus 185 against Gabriel Bonfim. Bonfim is the better all-around fighter, better grappler, but he's at a big not a big physicality differential, but a big durability differential in this fight. Chaos Williams, I think you could hit him with a truck and he may not tip over, may not even get taken down by that truck. But he has crazy knockout power of his own. He's extremely durable. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage here. And I really don't trust Bonfim's striking defense in the pocket. I think he's going to get clipped here, and we'll see if Williams' power is enough to put him away. So Williams plus 185. Also live after round 1. Bonfim does tend to fade as the fights extend and get into the 3rd round. Billy, we're aligned on the Williams fight. We're aligned on the Petroski fight. Curious if you have any thoughts on the Morales fight and then any other underdogs that we didn't get to or won't get to on the card that you're interested in betting.
Yeah, I'll be real quick on Chaos because I think you nailed it. And also just that boy hits real hard, and sometimes that's enough. When you're a big underdog, like if you've got that obvious way to win, maybe just take it. I don't like his inactivity so much, but again, we're getting plus money, so not a big deal. The interesting thing about Petroski from a stylistic standpoint, I think if you did a pure grappling match with these guys and you started them on the ground, whoever started on top would win every exchange.
Yep.
Because they're both so good from the top. Rodolfo Vieira, for being a guy who didn't wrestle for wrestling's sake and is a jiu-jitsu guy, good takedowns. Like he's a above average takedown artist for a jiu-jitsu player. Petroski was a Pennsylvania state champion who wrestled D1. That's one of those, like, there's levels to this thing. I also think in some ways he's the better MMA grappler. People have dogged him a lot because he's been real boring from the top his last couple fights. But, like, he was winning the fight, and his opponents were just hanging on for dear life. And Petroski is smart enough to say, okay, I'm winning this round. You're hanging on. I'm not going to leave an arm out there and do something stupid. Where Vieira, I think, switches into jiu-jitsu mode too often, where he's like, I don't get anything from being in top. I have to pass the guard. I have to do this. And he gives more openings and more risk. So that's one of the reasons. I also think Petroski's cardio is a bit better. We've just seen Vieira totally fall apart. Neither guy is like a cardio machine. These are big, strong grapplers, which is like the exact wrong thing you want to be if you want to fight extended fights. But if you watch Vieira strike, he's really tense. I think he's the better striker, but he's very tense and very explosive. Petroski is to an extent, but not as bad. So the nightmare scenario here is we just get like a bad striking match between these two because it won't be entertaining or good for our bet, I don't think. Even if that does happen, I think Petroski will look fresher later into the fight. So I like your live angle for that reason too. You know, I think we're aligned on that. The one pushback I'll give you on the Vince Morales-Elijah Smith fight, Morales was like plus 200 earlier in this week. This line has plummeted. I didn't do luck ratings this week. I was sick at the start of the week, so I missed that one. I think at this point you have to take Smith. A lot of the reasoning I'm seeing for all that money coming in on Morales is the cardio issue for Smith. He kind of fell apart in his 3rd round of his Contender Series fight. He took that one on very short notice. He was supposed to fight at a different date, stepped up early, and looked great through 2 rounds. 5 takedowns through the first 2 rounds, won the striking pretty easily in those, and then just kind of hit a cardio cliff. I'm willing to give him a pass on that just because it was a short notice fight. If that were his full training camp and we saw that, I'd go, okay, we have a cardio problem. And then we have the age gap, the athleticism, all that stuff. I probably still will come back in on Morales live if we get a big number. But from a pre-fight standpoint, just given the movement, I'm on the Smith side of that. So that's the one we disagree. The other thing is I was really big on Aaron Tao, who we fought on the Contender Series. I thought was one of the better prospects. And Smith just completely outclassed him until he got tired. So if he can do that, I would bet Aaron Tao over Vince Morales right now, I guess is how I would phrase that. So given that Smith did that, I do think he's the side pre-fight. Don't hate the live angle, though, because his cardio is questionable at best.
Yeah, fair enough. It's a very good shout out that Smith took that Contender Series fight on short notice. That wasn't in my notes, but yeah, I think all three underdogs, not like super interested in firing on them full allocation pre-fight. I think all three, you're likelier than not to get a better price live after round one. That Petrosky fight, I actually do have a feeling, especially like rounds 2, rounds 3 may play out as a very ugly kickboxing match, especially like if they neutralize each other on the ground. Maybe they both start getting a little bit tired. They're like, I'd rather strike this out. So maybe one of the 3 rounds, if it goes to a decision, ends up being, the worst kickboxing match for 5 minutes you've ever seen. But completely agree. Whoever's on top is winning that fight. I think Petrosky is the slightly better wrestler. I think he has more chance of just being on top. You said a bunch of things about Petrosky and Vieira's styles. Vieira prioritizes submission over position, which is going to allow Petrosky to get up from bottom. Petrosky prioritizes position over submission. I think if he's on top, Vieira less likely to get out from bottom. And I think that's kind of where we see the value on the underdog side of things. We're aligned on some prop angles as well. I'm going to throw it right back to you, though, for that Petrosky Adolfo Vieira fight. You like that fight to end before the 11-minute mark or before it starts round 3. So fight to end in the first 2 rounds between Petrosky and Vieira. Why'd you go with that angle as opposed to an under 2.5 or that ends inside the distance? Just less juice?
Yeah, less juice. You can play with the SGPs on DraftKings too and kind of tweak that up or down. I think you can get the minus 105 that I have in our sheet and still get the first 30 seconds of round 3 if you do it on DraftKings, if that matters to you. Like, it probably should, right? They'll be fresher at the start of the round. I just don't think these guys have the cardio to make it past the second round. I'm splitting my bet, so I've got half of a unit on Petrosky, to win half on this one. And they're going to engage each other with the grappling to an extent. Like, we think of Petrosky as this boring decision merchant, but that's because his last 2 opponents just had zero interest in grappling with him at all. It's really hard to submit someone who's just like backpacking you or hanging on for dear life from the bottom. They're going to give each other something. Vieira's going to go for an armbar from the bottom, and if he doesn't get it, Petrosky's going to have opportunity to strike. Petrosky's going to be looking to get up from the bottom. Vieira takes his back. Like, there's just plenty of things that can happen. And if they do have a sloppy, tense striking match, could probably Vieira, but one of them land something? Like, sure, especially once they get tired. So it's just kind of a little bit of my hedge here. I just don't think by the end of the second round, both guys are fresh. And hopefully it's one guy is fresh and not the other, so we get the finish. And yeah, so that's the way. One of those opponents who tried to hang on for dear life against Petrosky was Dylan Budka, and we're both talking about that one. So you give me your prop on that, and then I'll go with my version of that.
Oh, the Shabazian Dylan Budka fight. Yeah, we're both having an angle on this one. I considered betting it the way you're betting it, which is Shabazian to win in rounds 1 or 2 at plus 115. I also looked at Shabazian by KO, which is about plus 135. Shabazian round 1 is about plus 250. And then Shabazian by round 1 KO is about plus 350, plus 360. So the KO 1, I think, is a good round robin piece, or just his KO odds as a round robin piece. I like the fight to end inside the distance, though, at minus 185. I projected this at minus 260. Shabazian is always incredibly dangerous in round 1. Budka is going to be in serious danger in round 1. But then Shabazian's cardio drops off of a cliff. He isn't able to finish his opponents. Typically, he tries to finish them, and when he's unable to, he gasses himself out going for the finish, like he did in his last fight against Gerald Meerschaert. So Edmund Shabazian, always dangerous for about 6-7 minutes, which aligns with the way you bet it. The other way I should mention, a same game parlay with Shabazian and the under 1.5 rounds is plus 165. Probably comparable in terms of like edge and pricing as Billy's bet, which is Shabazian to win in rounds 1 or 2 at plus 115. So go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, that's how he's won all but one of his fights in his career, is in the first 2 rounds. He had a split decision on the Contender Series where, if I remember correctly, I didn't watch this tape because it was a long time ago, he got beat pretty badly in the 3rd round, and that's how we got to a split decision. Like, just for whatever reason, the cardio is not there. I think Budka has probably gotten the message loud and clear that he's got to go for something here. He missed weight for that fight against Petrosky, and it was a really boring fight, and he's lost both of his first 2 fights in the UFC. if nothing else, you got to go out there and try if you're Dylan Budka, and I hope that leaves some openings for Shabazian. I just don't think Dylan Budka is very good. I think we're trying to use him to get Shabazian rolling again because he's been the up-and-coming prospect for like 26 years now, who just needs to string some wins together after starting real hot. But yeah, I like the SGP angle that you mentioned to get, the first half or so of round two, because he's going to come out round two a little bit fresher again, right? Like he gets that minute break. I think a finish is probably more likely in the first minute of round two than it is the last minute of round one or whatever. So play with that, get whatever odds you want. If he wins, though, it's almost certainly how it's going to happen. So makes sense. And again, with the SGP, throw in a knockout if you want, juice it up a little bit more. I don't think you're getting a great price adjustment on that because that's how pretty much everyone sees it going, but also an option.
Yeah, and then Budka, probably a live target halfway through the fight, not live after round one, because as you said, Shabazian's still dangerous for the first couple minutes of round two. But halfway through the fight, Shabazian doesn't finish him at the start of round two. Interested in coming back on Budka live, provided it was not a 10-8 round in round one, because it's just very difficult to overcome the live market that factors in like the draw odds. You saw that last week with the Jimmy Crute fight. That was a very obvious 10-8 in round one. And I saw people coming back on Bellato, and I was like, yes, but he really needs to finish in order to win the fight. And came close to it. But yeah, ultimately a split draw there. A couple other props for me on this card. My favorite of the bunch, Jose Delgado inside the distance at plus 105 against Connor Matthews. I also like his knockout prop at about 2-1. Projected the inside the distance line at minus 150, so more than a 10% edge there based on the implied odds. Delgado's from MMA Lab. He's the bigger man, 3 inches taller, 2-inch reach advantage. He's also the much better striker. Matthews is nicknamed the controller because he just likes to hold on to opponents. There is very little danger there from him. He's also been knocked out, I believe, 3 times regionally, 3 times in amateur, 1 time professionally. I think there's a big striking disparity between these two. Seems like a bit of a layup for Jose Delgado in his first UFC fight. So inside the distance at plus 105, knockout at about 2-1, I'll likely have on round robin tickets. And then the Rafael Estevam Jesus Aguilar fight, I projected this fight at minus 130 to go to a decision. They're giving you plus money, plus 115. I also like Estevam by decision about plus 165 or so. But yeah, I just think there's more value on the GTD overall. There was a 50-cent difference between Estevam by decision and the fight to go to a decision. 7-inch reach advantage for Estevam, but also the much better wrestler. Aguilar is basically an overhand and a bunch of guillotine attempts, and that's his entire game. He's probably going to spend 12 of the 15 minutes on bottom here, unable to get up, and hopefully he does not get finished in the process. So fight to go to a decision, hopefully a boring wrestling-based decision for Estevam. And then Estevam by decision I'll put on round robin tickets, projected that line at even money. Billy, any thoughts on Delgado Matthews or Estevam versus Aguilar?
Yeah, Aguilar's hilarious, man. Like I love watching him fight because it's so dumb, and we should all know what he's doing by now. It's not a secret, but yeah, that's fun. My only real thought is I adjusted Jose Delgado north of Estevam in my DFS projections when I saw how you're playing both those in the show sheet, and it made a lot of sense. I do think Delgado's the far more likely finisher. Connor Matthews got finished by Dennis Bazooka, who you once said's best attribute was tries real hard, and Delgado is actually like good at stuff and probably also tries hard. So that's, yeah, I like that one.
What scores better in DFS? A round one, like a quick round one knockout, or 15 minutes of top time, like 12 minutes of top time?
So the control time doesn't score very well. Okay. Finishes score, but takedowns score really well. So you're trying to thread the needle of like Aljamain Sterling's going to get 8 takedowns, but let you up and then take you down again. So for that reason, that's why like you want, it's kind of finishing and then takedowns and then control time is like the priority chart for the most part. So yeah, that's a first round finish, and both these guys are highly priced. So you kind of need either a finish or like 5-6 takedowns for them to pay off. And Delgado, I think, is clearly more likely of the two to get that. So yeah, definitely adjusted that because of your analysis. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, that makes 100% sense.
Yeah, I'll probably be using Delgado everywhere in terms of DraftKings lineups this week. Make sure to go to Fantasy Labs. You can build out multiple lineups. You can, lock in guys that you want as part of all of your lineups and then optimize lineups around that. I use it every week to build out my DFS lineups. I think it's a super valuable tool. You can use Sean Kerner's projections that are loaded in there. You can adjust those projections manually and create all your lineups. So I'll be hitting the lock button very likely on Delgado this week and trying to mix other combinations in and around him. But one fight that probably will not be used in terms of my DFS selections, my best bet, which I like to go to decision between Nazim Sadikov and Ishmael Bonfim. I like this fight to go to decision at -130. I projected it closer to -170. Seeing a lot of people planting flags on either side of this fight this week. I just think it's going to be competitive. I think Sadikov will probably outperform his moneyline odds and make this a little bit more competitive than the moneyline suggests. But I still view Ishmael Bonfim as the rightful favorite. I think he's more technical. I think he's a bit more dangerous in terms of the grappling, but I don't love his cardio or his durability as much as I like Sadikov. So do see a pretty competitive fight between these two. I think Bonfim live to a submission. I think Sadikov live to a KO, but I do think it goes to the scorecards a bit more often than the odds suggest. Not necessarily a best bet this week so much as a final bet. I kind of like these, as much as I like the other totals. I like it as much as I like the Delgado inside the distance and the under in that fight. But this did stand out as one of my bigger projected edges this week. Billy, any thoughts on the Sadikov Bonfim fight? And then you're going to finish this off with a pick'em fight between Angela Hill and Ketlin Souza.
No, that seems about right. It should be competitive. He got 10-8'd in the third round against Slava Claus, correct?
It was round 2. He got a 10-8 on 2 of the cards in round 2. He like nearly finished Slava in round 2, and then Slava actually worked his way back into the fight in round 3. And it was kind of tough to tell whether he was going to fade anyway or if he faded because he went for the finish. I think he more so faded because he went for the finish. So I'd still kind of favor Sadikov on cardio over Bonfim, but I don't think I don't think either of them has elite cardio for the division.
Yeah, the cardio angle is always tough too, because if both guys get tired, we get a decision. If one guy gets tired before the other, then it lends you the opposite way. But yeah, I like that. And then mine also very much a final bet, like not strong feelings on that. But if you just looked at their last couple fights, especially since Ketlin Souza moved divisions against Angela Hill, you'd say, yeah, this is about what the line should be, right? They've been, Angela Hill lost a semi-close decision to Tabitha Hichi, beat Luana Pinheiro. Ketlin Souza's won both of her fights at 115, but against low-ish level competition, although I like Uruguay. If you, just looked at that, there's an 11-year age gap. Angela Hill's on the wrong side of 40. I've probably said this for like 12 straight Angela Hill fights or something, but at some point she's going to fall off, right? Like, she can't keep doing this forever. It is the lightest weight class in the UFC. We always talk about the lighter the weight class, they tend to age faster. I don't know if that necessarily applies differently with women than men, but the logic is still there that it's more speed and quickness dependent. She's roughly 50-50 over the period. I've been saying she's going to fall off any minute, so it hasn't worked out horribly for me. She hasn't fallen off. I just think Ketlin Souza, huge athletic advantage. Again, looked really good against Yasmin Uruguay, who I'm somewhat high on. If it happens here, it's like basically a free bet. And if it doesn't happen here, it's still a close fight. So we're flipping a coin if Angela Hill is still Angela Hill and kind of getting free rolled if she doesn't. So final bet, not a best bet, but yeah, that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I target Hill live after round 1. I want to see how she looks. As you mentioned, she's in her 40s now. Jared Cannonier in his 40s now. Rodriguez likely to be his best early in the fight. He's never gone 5 rounds. I think with both not the first fight on the card, but the Souza Hill fight, I think very similar to the main event. Look at the 41-year-old, see how they're doing in round 1. Are they competitive? Are they in Cannonier's case, is he denying takedowns? Is he getting back up from takedowns? In Hill's case, is she landing takedowns? Is she attempting takedowns? Because I do think she has a potential wrestling advantage in this fight. She's shown better grappling of later in her career. She's continued to make improvements as she's gotten older as a fighter, which is extremely impressive, but that athletic cliff is going to come at some point, and in her 40s, it is increasingly likely with each and every fight. But yeah, Hill live after round 1, I would consider, just based on how she looks in the first round. If it's competitive, and her price blows out, absolutely take stab, particularly if she hasn't shot a takedown to that point, because if she has that in her back pocket, if she's able to mix it up and she hasn't shown it yet, but she's competitive in the striking, I think I'd be interested in a live entry. Just want to shout out the other potential live entries on this card. I mentioned Dylan Bugka, probably halfway through the fight, near the end of round 2, midway through round 2. Sadikov, potentially live after round 1. Talked about Angela Hill. Chaos Williams, Vince Morales, maybe. You talked about Elijah Smith coming off of a short notice contender series fight. So take a look at how the wrestling is going in that fight. If Smith is able to land takedowns, I don't want any part of Morales. If Morales is denying takedowns, I think that fight will be competitive for 15 minutes. And then lastly, Dontel Mays, live after round 1 as well against Walter Walker, Johnny Walker's brother. Billy, we didn't touch on that fight. We didn't touch on the first fight on the card. Any thoughts, though, before we get out of here on the Dontel Mays fight or on anything we didn't get to?
No, I mean, this is a great one to take the first hour of the card off. If you're not I don't think you're going to miss anything.
No.
Walker is weird. Like, in theory, he should be better, but his win in the UFC was a heel hook where Junior Tafa made some noise and the ref just waved it off with 2 seconds left in the round. And I don't know if it was really on or not. And he made some noise, but he didn't get up and limp away because his ACL was torn. So it's hard to argue that was really on. If you take that win away, I don't know that this line is what it is. With that said, I was sick this week. I didn't watch tape on every fight. I certainly did not want to watch any tape on Walter Walker or Dontel Mays or Julia Avila is also over 40. Is she not, or close to it?
Yeah,
no, only 36.
The hair certainly makes her look 40. I believe she's in her late 30s. But yeah, Julia Avila, the Raging Panda, first fight on the card. Yeah, nothing really for me on either the Avila fight or the Mays Walker fight, aside from the Mays live angle. Technically, I projected value on Avila by decision. I think Cavalcante just too big for her, much younger, likely to pick her apart in the striking. And I think that'll do it for us for our UFC betting preview for this weekend. You can find more UFC content from both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. You can find his co-main event preview, and my main event preview will be up later on Friday afternoon. Remember, if you'd like to instantly tail some of the bets that we discussed today on this show, look for the quick slip link in the podcast and video description, or visit actionnetwork.com/bet now. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and sign up for Action Pro for immediate access to expert picks and analysis. Best of luck with all your bets this week and enjoy the violence. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.